The day I turned 70, I thought the worst thing that could happen was forgetting to order enough chairs for the restaurant. I was wrong. My daughter-in-law made sure of that. Follow my story until the end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Barbara. Well, most people who've known me for more than 20 minutes call me Babs, but my son always called me Mom, which is the only title I ever truly wanted. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio. I held strangers' hands at 3 in the morning when their families couldn't make it in time. I talked people through panic attacks in the middle of thunderstorms. I learned how to read a room the way other people read the weather, by the small signs, the ones most people miss, a certain stillness in someone's jaw, the way a person avoids your eyes, not because they're shy, but because they're calculating. I should have read those signs sooner, but when it's your own family, you tell yourself you're imagining things. You tell yourself love makes people better than they actually are. My son, let's call him my son, because that's what he is, that's how I think of him. That's who he is to me before anything else. Married his wife 9 years ago in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Cincinnati. She wore ivory. She cried during the vows. I thought those tears were real. I cried too, and I know mine were. She came into our lives like a gust of fresh air. Sharp, pretty, always put together. She had a quick laugh and remembered details about people, your favorite coffee order, your sister's birthday, the name of your childhood dog. That kind of thing wins you over fast. It won me over completely. My son had 2 children from his first marriage, a boy who was 14 when their father remarried, and a girl who had just turned 11. Their mother had moved to Portland when the divorce was finalized, and while she was present in their lives, the day-to-day fell mostly to my son. And then to his new wife, who stepped into that role without complaint. At least, that's what I saw from the outside. I lived about 40 minutes away in the house I'd shared with my husband for 27 years before he passed. Heart attack, 6 years ago March. Quick and quiet, which is how he would have wanted it, though I would have wanted more warning. I kept the house because I couldn't imagine sleeping anywhere that didn't have his presence somewhere in the walls. I helped where I could. I watched the kids on school holidays when my son had to travel for work. I drove the girl to her orthodontist appointments because the office was closer to my side of town. When my son and his wife bought their house, a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb north of Columbus, more house than they could comfortably afford at the time, I gave them $40,000 toward the down payment. I didn't call it a loan. I called it what it was, a mother helping her son build something stable. I didn't attach conditions to it. I didn't ask to be thanked at family dinners. I just did it because it was the right thing to do, and because I had the means, and because that's what you do when you love someone. Over the years, I helped in other ways too. When my son's wife decided she wanted to go back to school for her real estate license, I covered their groceries for 4 months so the household budget could absorb her study time. When the furnace went out the winter before last, I wrote a check. When the girl needed braces and the insurance only covered 60%, I covered the rest without being asked. I didn't keep score. I want to be clear about that. I am not a scorekeeper by nature, but I'm also not blind, and I'm not a fool. And somewhere around year 6 or 7 of this marriage, I started to notice things. The way my daughter-in-law would go quiet when I walked into a room, not the comfortable quiet of someone at ease, but the particular quiet of someone rearranging their expression. The way she'd answer my questions with just enough warmth to be polite, and just little enough to make clear I wasn't welcome to ask more. The way the kids, who had been easy and affectionate with me when they were younger, started keeping a careful distance. Not cold, exactly, just careful, like they'd been coached. My son noticed none of this or chose not to notice, which amounts to the same thing. He's a good man, patient, steady, the kind of person who assumes the best until he absolutely cannot anymore. His father was the same way. It's a beautiful quality until someone decides to exploit it. My 70th birthday fell on a Saturday in October. My son had called me 2 weeks before to tell me they were planning something at Harvest Table, a farm-to-table restaurant about 20 minutes from their house. Nice place. Exposed brick, seasonal menu, the kind of lighting that makes everyone look like they're in a magazine. I'd been there once before for my friend Connie's retirement lunch, and I remembered the lamb chops were exceptional. He said it would be a small group, immediate family, A few close friends of mine. He said his wife had already called ahead and made the reservation. He sounded genuinely excited, which made me feel guilty for all the small suspicions I'd been carrying quietly for months. I wore a deep burgundy dress that I'd bought specifically for the occasion. My friend Connie helped me pick it out. She said I looked elegant. I felt like myself, which is the best you can hope for at 70. We arrived at the restaurant. Me, Connie, and my neighbor Shirley, who I'd known for nearly 20 years. My son was already there with his wife and the kids, now 17 and 14. Two of my son's cousins had driven in from Dayton. A colleague from my nursing days, named Alice, had made the trip from Cleveland. 10 people total, seated at a long table near the window overlooking a small herb garden. It started well. There was Prosecco. There was a menu they'd pre-selected, which was thoughtful. My son gave a little speech that made me cry in the good way. The kids handed me a card they'd clearly made themselves, drawings and inside jokes, and I pressed it to my chest because I meant it. Then the food came. The appetizers were lovely. The salads were lovely. Somewhere on the main course, the conversation shifted the way conversations sometimes do. Loosely, a little unpredictably, the way water finds its own level. My son's cousin was asking me about retirement, about what I did with my days, and I was telling a story about the watercolor class I'd started taking at the community center, when my daughter-in-law set down her wine glass just a little too deliberately. "Watercolors," she said with a smile that didn't quite match her tone. "That's sweet." I looked at her. She looked back. The table kept talking. "It's actually very technical," I said pleasantly. "More than people think." She smiled again. Same smile. "Sure." Connie caught my eye across the table. I gave a small shake of my head. Let it go. Not tonight. But my daughter-in-law had made a calculation that evening, and I think she'd made it before we'd even arrived. I think she'd decided that with enough Prosecco and enough peripheral conversation and a table full of people who wouldn't want to make a scene at a birthday dinner, she could say what she'd been wanting to say for a long time. She waited until the entrees were nearly finished. Then she waited for a natural lull, the kind that happens when everyone has eaten enough to lean back and breathe. "You know," she said, addressing the table but looking directly at me, "I love your mother-in-law." "I do. But I have to say, and I mean this lovingly, she has to be the most impractical woman I have ever known." The table went quiet. "She means well," she continued almost cheerfully, "but she's not useful. You know, like in any real practical sense. She shows up. She wants to be involved. But when it actually counts, when there's real work to be done, she's just kind of there." She tilted her head. "Decorative." I felt the air leave my body. Not from hurt, exactly. I've worked emergency rooms. I've delivered bad news to families. I don't crumple easily. What left me was something more like recognition, the specific, hollow feeling of realizing you've been seeing someone clearly for a while and hoping you were wrong, and now you know you weren't. My son had gone very still beside her. He was staring at his plate. The kids were staring at the table. Connie looked like she was about to say something. I got there first. I set my fork down. I folded my napkin. I took a breath, not a theatrical one, just the kind you take when you want to be sure of your own voice. "I appreciate you sharing that," I said. I kept my tone even. "Since we're being honest tonight, let me be honest too. You've accepted quite a bit from someone you consider decorative. The down payment on your house, the groceries while you were in school, the furnace, the braces. Off the top of my head, I'd say that's somewhere north of $60,000 over 9 years." I paused. "Decorative things don't usually come with invoices, but if you'd prefer, I can start." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. My daughter-in-law's face went through several expressions very quickly. She landed on something between fury and humiliation, which is an uncomfortable place to land in a restaurant full of people who just heard everything you said. "That's not—" "I didn't mean it like that," she started. "You said it in front of 10 people, I said, still calm. "I'm not sure how else you could have meant it." My son finally looked up. He opened his mouth. I held up one hand, not to stop him from defending me, but to let him know I didn't need it. I had this. I'd had it the moment she opened her mouth. "I think we should get the check," I said. Connie immediately flagged down the server. Shirley was very busy rearranging her silverware. My son's cousins from Dayton were looking at the herb garden outside with great intensity. We got the check, we paid, we left. In the parking lot, my son caught up to me while Connie and Shirley waited by the car. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the last 40 minutes. "Mom," he said. "I know," I said. "I didn't know she was going to—" "I know you didn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. You didn't do it," I said. "But we need to talk. Not tonight, this week." He nodded. I hugged him because he's my son and he was hurting, and that part was not his fault. I drove home with Connie and Shirley, and nobody said much for the first 10 minutes. Then Connie said, "Decorative." I can't believe she said decorative. And Shirley said, $60,000. And we sat with that for a while. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was upset about what I'd said. I wasn't. I said what was true, and I said it quietly, and I didn't apologize for it. What kept me up was the thinking that had to happen now. The decisions I hadn't wanted to face but couldn't keep postponing. I had, in my bedside drawer, a document that my attorney had helped me update 6 months earlier. It was a revised financial plan that outlined my state, my assets, and my intentions for both. I'd updated it partly because I turned 70 and felt it was responsible to have things in order, and partly because I'd had a feeling, one of those nurse feelings you develop over decades of watching situations develop before they become emergencies, that something needed to be formalized. That document included a significant amount that I had loosely intended to leave to my son and his family. The house, certain investments, the proceeds from a life insurance policy my husband had taken out back in 1987 that had grown considerably. It wasn't a fortune, but it was meaningful. It was the kind of money that changes what's possible for a family. I called my attorney, Sylvia, on Monday morning. She answered on the second ring. I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about her. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I finished. "I want to restructure," I said. "I want the kids, both of them, the grandchildren, protected directly. Not through their father. Definitely not through their mother. I want them to have access when they're adults, for education, for housing, for the things that matter. But I want that separate and protected." Sylvia said she could have a revised document ready by the end of the week. I also called my son that Monday. He came over Tuesday evening without his wife. He sat at my kitchen table the way he used to as a boy when something was wrong and he didn't know how to start talking. I made coffee. We sat. He told me he'd spoken with her. She'd said she was sorry. He seemed to believe it was genuine, or at least wanted to. I let him have that. I told him I wasn't looking to end anyone's marriage or blow up the family. I told him what I was changing and why. Not to punish him, but because what had happened made clear to me that I'd been too informal about things I should have formalized long ago. He was quiet for a long time. "She doesn't know about the estate stuff," he finally said. "No," I said. "She doesn't. She's going to think. She can think whatever she wants." I said gently, "My financial decisions are mine. They always were. I should have been clear about that a long time ago." He didn't argue. He knew I was right. He also looked, underneath the conflict and the exhaustion, like someone who had been carrying a heavy thing for a long time and had just been told he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. I don't know if I'm reading that correctly. Maybe I wanted to see it, but I think it was there. The weeks that followed were not easy. My daughter-in-law sent a text message the Wednesday after my birthday. It was 3 paragraphs long, and it covered, in order, an apology, a defense of the apology, and a suggestion that I had overreacted. I read it twice, set my phone down, and made oatmeal. I didn't respond that day or the day after. Eventually, I sent back a single line. "Thank you for reaching out. I think it's best if we give this some time." She did not love that answer. About 3 weeks after the birthday dinner, I got a call from my son. His wife had found out, through a comment my son's cousin made, apparently, not thinking it would get back to anyone, that I had been in contact with an attorney. She hadn't found out specifics, but she'd gotten enough to start asking questions. The call my son described was not a calm one. She had apparently accused me of using money as a weapon. She'd accused him of taking my side. She'd brought up the dinner again, this time reframed as a misunderstanding that I had escalated by bringing up finances publicly, which was, according to her, deeply inappropriate. My son called to tell me this, I think partly because he felt I deserved to know, and partly because he needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't in the middle of it. I listened. I asked him how he was doing. I asked him how the kids were. He said the kids were fine, that they mostly seemed unaware of the specifics, though the older one, the boy, now in his junior year, had asked his father at some point whether Grandma Babs was still coming to Thanksgiving. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him of course you were," my son said. "Good," I said, "because I am." There was a pause on the line. "She's not happy about the lawyer thing," he said. "I know. She feels like you're—" "I know what she feels," I said. "But let me ask you something. When she said what she said at dinner, when she called me impractical and decorative in front of our whole family and my closest friends, on my 70th birthday, was that her being hurt? Was that her defending herself from something I'd done?" My son was quiet. "I asked because I want to understand if I'm missing something," I said. "I genuinely do, but I can't find anything. I've been going over it for 3 weeks and I can't find a thing I did that justified that." "There isn't one," he said quietly. "Okay," I said. "Then I'm not restructuring my estate to hurt her. I'm doing it because she showed me something I needed to see, and I'm responding to what I actually saw." Thanksgiving was not the warm occasion it had been in previous years, but it wasn't the disaster I'd half expected either. There was a careful, functional quality to the afternoon. My daughter-in-law was polite in the practiced way of someone who has made a decision to perform politeness for the sake of the room. I matched her. We were two adults behaving well in front of children, and we both knew that was what we were doing, and we both did it anyway, which is its own kind of grace. The kids were wonderful. The boy helped me carry things in from the car. The girl sat next to me at dinner and showed me photos she'd taken on a disposable camera she'd been using as a project. The turkey was good. The pie was better. After dessert, when the kids had wandered off and my son was in the kitchen washing dishes, my daughter-in-law came and sat near me in the living room. I had my coffee. She had her wine. We sat for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "I know you changed things. I didn't play dumb. Some things, yes. The kids are the kids are taken care of," I said. "They'll always be taken care of. That's not something you need to worry about." She lifted her wine glass. Something moved across her face that I couldn't name completely. Part of it might have been relief, and part of it might have been something more complicated. The particular discomfort of realizing that the person you dismissed as decorative had been thinking several moves ahead the whole time. "I shouldn't have said what I said," she told me. It came out quieter than anything else she'd said all day, less rehearsed. "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't have. We didn't hug. We didn't resolve into some made-for-TV moment of forgiveness and tears." But she nodded, and I nodded, and we sat there and finished our drinks while the sounds of my son washing dishes and my grandchildren laughing at something in the next room filled the house with the ordinary, irreplaceable noise of a family continuing on. I'm 70 now, and I know some things with certainty that I didn't know at 40 or 50, or even 60. I know that loving someone is not the same as being available to them without limit. I know that helping people doesn't obligate them to love you back, but it also doesn't obligate you to keep helping them when they've made clear what they think of you. I know that the money I worked for and saved and earned over 31 years as a nurse, 31 years of night shifts and difficult families and decisions that would keep other people awake, belongs to me, and the choices I make with it are mine, and no one sitting at my table gets to call me decorative and then inherit my life's work. I know that my grandchildren are going to be okay. I made sure of it, and I know that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do in a room full of people waiting for her to shrink is to sit up straight, fold her napkin, and say exactly what is true. I did that. I'd do it again. If you're watching this and you felt invisible in your own family, if you've given and had it handed back to you as though it counted for nothing, I see you. Stay until the end of your own story. It's not over yet. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you all are watching from, and if this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. I've had a lot of time to sit with everything that happened. The dinner, the silence at that table, the phone calls that followed, The quiet Tuesday evening when my son sat across from me in my kitchen and didn't quite know what to say. And what I keep coming back to is this: nothing that happened was accidental. Not her words, and not my response to them. Every action in that room had been building for years. Quietly, the way pressure builds before something finally gives. My daughter-in-law didn't wake up that October morning and decide to become a different person. She'd been that person for a while. I'd seen the edges of it, the half smile, the careful distance, the way warmth flickered on and off like a light with a loose connection. What she did at that dinner wasn't a mistake or a slip. It was a choice, made in a room full of witnesses on a night she calculated would protect her from real consequences. She misjudged me. That's the whole story, really. And I think about what that kind of choice costs a person, not in some abstract poetic sense, but practically, concretely. She spent years accepting help from someone she held in contempt, and the contempt didn't stay hidden forever. It never does. When you carry that kind of internal dishonesty long enough, it leaks. It leaked at my birthday dinner, in front of Connie and Shirley and my son's cousins and my colleague Alice, who'd driven 2 hours from Cleveland to be there. The room heard everything, including me. What I did afterward wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that, because I've thought about it carefully. I didn't restructure my estate to punish her. I did it because she gave me information I needed and I responded to it. That's not cruelty. That's intelligence. There's a difference between those two things that took me a long time to understand, and I think a lot of women my age were raised to blur that line deliberately. To believe that protecting yourself is the same as being unkind. It isn't. 31 years as a nurse taught me that the people who last, the ones who keep showing up decade after decade in difficult rooms under difficult circumstances, are not the ones who are the hardest. They're the ones who are the clearest. Clear about what they can give. Clear about what they won't. Clear about the difference between genuine care and being used as a resource by someone who never once looked at you as a full person. I gave generously because I wanted to. I stopped giving in certain directions because I saw what I was actually giving toward. Both of those decisions came from the same place, a clear-eyed understanding of my own values and what they require of me. My grandchildren are protected. My son knows where I stand. My daughter-in-law knows now too, which I think is the only honest foundation any of us had ever actually been standing on. I folded my napkin that night, and I said what was true. I'd do it again. Not because it felt good, though I won't pretend it didn't, but because clarity, delivered quietly in the right moment, is the most powerful thing I have ever witnessed one human being offer another, even when the other person isn't ready to receive it, especially then.